Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. I was muting my cell phone.
Well, because as everybody who watches this regularly knows, there's always some kind of a technological
Absolutely.
whatever glitch.
So far we've gotten 1,000.
So you're not in your regular spot. You look different this morning.
Yes, I'm in Austin, or just outside of Austin in Round Rock this morning. At my mother-in-law's home, and we love her so much. I'm one of those blessed people that has wonderful family on all sides. So
that is awesome.
yes.
So, well, thank you for being here with us this morning.
I'm glad I got to be here. As always, always makes me nervous when we change anything.
I know. I know. Who knows what's going to happen? Well,
Right.
This morning we have a great guest. Just recently we had Lauren Straka on from who's starting her own school now, and she's had a daycare, and so we're going to introduce Amy Cook here in a second. And Amy, I'm fairly certain that Amy could run a marathon and juggle at the same time. She seems to do quite a number of things. Very talented lady. So she has a book that we're going to talk about. Warrior Up is the name of her book. And we're going to talk about that. And then she's also starting her own school. She's a former public school teacher, a science teacher like me. So we're going to talk to Amy Cook this morning and bring her on. Good morning, Amy Cook. Uh-oh, I can't hear you. Let me unmute you. Here you are.
Good morning.
See, I may have jinxed us. I said there'd be something.
Right.
Thank you so much for being on with us this morning.
Of course. My pleasure.
It's very good to see you. So I wanted to ask you, I'm going to kind of mess around with this for just a second and see if I can't figure out how to get us into a better configuration. You were a public school teacher.
Yes, for 6 years.
And what did you teach?
I taught advanced high school science and some AP science classes, and a little bit of pre-engineering.
Oh, so nothing. I mean, wow, that's quite a bit. So where did you teach?
Memorial High School.
And is that in Tulsa?
Yes.
Okay. So you were a public school teacher in the TPS system.
Yes, all 6 years. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So you're not teaching in TPS now?
No, my last day was this last May 25th. Walked out the door with no badge and no keys, and it was kind of a surreal moment that I was not going to be at that school anymore after 6 years. You know, you really get attached to the students and the staff.
Right.
So what happened there?
A lot. Well, my first year I came in there just like most parents out there, probably assuming that school, what happened there was the same as when I was in high school. And that was simply not the case. It's so much has changed. So much of the academic is covered up by politically charged programs and a lot of fluffy social emotional stuff, and it was very strange. I tried to roll with it at first, and then as I saw things becoming more and more, spiritually dangerous, in my opinion, and in a lot of other people's opinion, and just taken away from their learning. is what I was seeing. I couldn't stay silent. So I think that made for an interesting last 3 or 4 years of my teaching.
So did you feel like you could say anything to the administration about what was going on, or?
No. There were a couple of times in the beginning that I kind of tried to be subtle and speak up, but say, hey, this is kind of, seems like a red flag. Why are we saying it this way or that way or doing this or that? And was pretty much just ignored, or just they waved it away. Like, no, just do your job.
So was that kind of the impetus for you leaving? Was that kind of, I've tried, I tried to say something and nothing's happening here. So, sayonara.
Well, really, it was the more time went on, the more I realized that since I wasn't willing to put my own identity, my faith in God on the shelf for part of my day, I wasn't willing to just hide it. Not that I never preached it or even brought it up in the classroom. That wasn't what it was about at all. But people assume that it was more, I represented God in the way I acted and just the way I treated people. And if someone did ask me, because it's obvious when someone believes in God and supports scripture, it becomes obvious through your behavior that that's what you are. So then they ask. Naturally, the students ask. And they would ask me sometimes, and I was always honest. Yes, I am a Christian. Yes, I do support the Bible. But I tried not to get drawn into their conversations because it could go deeper. And I would just say, it sounds like you've got a lot of interesting thoughts going on in your head there. And I encourage you to, if you're curious about more, you can always read the Bible and find out what it says for yourself. Have a discussion with your parents, obviously. Because I'm a big advocate for parents and their role in their children's lives. So, but as time went on, I realized that I was going to not be able to keep my job and maintain my faith in that school. There were things that I could not stay quiet about, things where they were teaching the children, they were spending way too much time even teaching the children all these made up genders and made up sexual orientations. Asking us teachers to respect these new chosen pronouns, which were a lie, because as a biology teacher, I can tell you that they were not that gender, that they were.
You're qualified.
Yeah. And so to that, I would be lying to them, even just on a non-religious level. And when I refused that stuff, I was putting myself in trouble. And I was even written up a couple times for that. Because they didn't like that I didn't respect that. They told us at one point, they were telling some of the new teachers coming on in a big training session that they were not allowed to tell the parents if the student didn't want the parents to know that they had decided to change their gender and their name.
So wait, let me back up. So Tulsa Public Schools were telling teachers not to tell parents if the kids felt like they were another gender.
Yes. And they even had teachers that would in my building who would assure the students that this was a safe place, that they didn't have to worry about their parents who didn't support them or understand their new chosen identity. These are these were also the same teachers who were whispering in their ear from the beginning that they might be a different gender or sexual orientation because they were feeling awkward or having an awkward time, instead of just recognizing that teenagers, it's an awkward time anyways.
Right.
They said, well, it's probably just because you're in the wrong body, or this is what they're whispering to them, these teachers. And not very many. I would say most of the teachers at Memorial High School did not do that, but the few that were doing it were really just dominating the student body with their ideology.
And so they wouldn't listen to the biology teacher. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm down the hall teaching because we do go over genetics at some point in high school biology, and in advanced biology, we really get deep into the structure of a DNA and the coding and the chromosomes. And I'm going X, X, and XY, but the kids are hearing that, and then they're hearing the stuff that has nothing to do with science and is just someone's idea in their head.
Yeah, Satan, the author of confusion.
Yeah, confusion is the key word. Over the last 4 years, I saw the kids become more and more confused because it seemed to happen right before COVID shutdown stuff. The kids really weren't showing as much confusion and just strange speaking out about or outing themselves and stuff. It wasn't happening as much. And then right around that time of that COVID shutdown is when I noticed kids starting to act different and suddenly have these bold moments where they'd come out and speak about their current gender of the week. And I say that lovingly because teenagers change their minds on a dime. They're just trying to figure out who they are. And so, if you wait a couple of days, they're probably going to think different about it. So,
yeah.
Well, and it's when you just
sterilized when they start the shots and everything else.
when you just said that, I thought of something that I had not even thought of before. So they've been doing this for years. This whole, trying to through sex education in schools and that kind of thing. I mean, this has been happening. But then when we had the shutdown and kids, weren't allowed to be around their friends, and being around their friends as young adults is huge.
Yes.
Huge. And it's the isolation, when you can't be confirmed, as a friend, and you don't have these, friendships with other kids. It makes, I think, kids want to do whatever they can to feel included. And, if that means, because, we, especially at that age, we want companionship, so I can totally see, and I never even put those two things together, but that does make some sense. But beyond that,
everyone is gay and insecure about their sexuality. Well, then me too. That's the way they see it.
Yeah. So let's talk first about what you've decided to do, because I know so many people say several things. I'm upset about this. I see this happening, but I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. Well, you don't seem to have that problem.
I really had to step out in faith and trust God that He's going to take care of me with this new transition, because I was leaving a full-time income, and it just it was a little bit scary, I'll admit. I don't know. I still, some of it, there's a lot of unknowns out there, but I wanted to create a space for students where they wouldn't have some politically charged nonsense just constantly thrown at them, and instead would just have truth and academics. And I didn't want them to have to put their faith on a shelf during the day. That one thing that I learned in the public schools, one of the students that even came to me, wrote me an email, it was so sweet, and said that she, for the first time, felt like she could be a Christian in my class and not be put down or made fun of. And she was thankful because she said it's really hard to be a Christian in that school, that she felt very alone. And I was like, how sad that, everyone else gets to have their ideology out there and they're not made fun of. But if a kid wants to have Christian values, they have to hide it because they're made fun of. And but I wanted that safe place where they could actually learn, because they really do need the math and the reading and the writing. They desperately need. I mean, obviously in Tulsa, they're not getting enough of that because there's too much time spent on the fluff. And you think they would want to hyper focus on math and reading since our scores are so low, but instead that's the last thing that you see being focused on. You don't hear the programs talked about for that. They're like, oh, we're suffering in reading and math. well, let's do some more social emotional learning programs then. What sense does that make?
Yeah.
Yeah. We've noticed, that's one of the things we've noticed with the parents that are going to school board meetings and all of that. The school board meetings are never about academics.
Right.
It's about all this other stuff. Right.
So our school is going to be heavily focused on first reading because it is such an epidemic, especially in Tulsa, illiteracy. We want to try to just get rid of that. We want the students to come into our building and have a firm grasp of reading and writing, because it truly is a handicap in life if you can't do that. I've seen it firsthand with close friends even who struggled with that, and it held them back from careers. That should never be a case. That's such an easy thing for people to obtain if they have people willing to offer it. And so we're going to offer that, and also math skills. That's definitely something that's important in life. But then we also have a Christian theme, which was a relief to me because then I can give students what I know to be true, which is something I couldn't really do in the public school without getting in trouble. So that was a relief to me. I did want to say.
So let's.
Oh, go ahead.
So let's make sure we say you are founding a school called Guardian Academy.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And where is Guardian Academy?
It is in Northeast Tulsa, kind of almost Catoosa. It's kind of out in the country though. In that northeast corner, there's like a horse pasture on one side of the road, and it's all trees and grass out there. So it's not like city Tulsa, if that makes sense.
That's great.
Yeah.
That was one of the things Lauren talked about, was that she's got this beautiful backyard for the kids to go. Sometimes they do outside school.
Yes. It's actually in Alina Ashley's ward, her district. So we were excited about that. Serve the children in her area, but all over. They want to drive there.
Very good. So you're calling it a one-room schoolhouse. So Lauren Straka, for heaven's sake, she's also doing the same thing. Why don't you explain the concept?
Okay. So this is how schools started out in the United States. Once we had organized schools, they were the colonists, the settlers. They had the community would put a building up. Usually it would be a church, used as a church as well. So then during the week, they would find a teacher, hire one from outside their town, and the community would have a need and have children. So they'd bring in a teacher, and that teacher would do all grades because usually there weren't enough students for just one grade or another grade, so you just mixed them all together. The littlest ones who were not as advanced sat up front, and the more advanced and older ones sat in the back. And you kind of naturally progress through the lessons. You would start the older ones on some independent work and then work your way to the front and do more focused work with the younger ones, and then go work your way back to the back to do some more focused work with them once you had the littler ones doing something independent. So it just kind of goes back. It's definitely more work, I would say. And I bet your other lady, Lauren, yes, thank you, would also echo that. It's more work, but it's a joy. You're just constantly working with the kids, and I think it's going to make the day go faster, honestly. Days when I wasn't able to constantly be just on my feet going from student to student, my day went slower. Yeah. It's just more enjoyable that way. But there's more to it than that. So you do one subject at a time, of course. You'll say, now we're all going to work on math, or now we're all going to work on science. And the cool thing, especially with science and history, is that those things build on each other, and all the different concepts kind of tie together and support each other. So you've got older kids who are then hearing again the next year, they're hearing that same the same content, but maybe they're catching things that they didn't catch the first time around, and they're filling in those holes. So they're getting this nice solid foundation. They're also seeing what they've already learned. And then the younger kids get the benefit of seeing what they still need to learn. And so they've got past accomplishments and future goals all in the same room. And then there's a little bit of mentorship going on. The younger kids are watching the older kids. They're learning how to become mentors, and the older kids are then being those mentors and getting that joy of serving others in your community. And so that community mindset. And that's what I want to see more of these in neighborhoods. I like to call them neighborhood schools. Every town, every city should be popping these up all over the place. The government really should not, they don't have any business being in education. They never should have been asked. That was a lazy way out for people. And in my opinion, it was better before when it was one room schoolhouse and it was working. The results were outstanding, and we got away from it because when the government stepped in, that was their way of organizing it, was to put all the first graders together, all the second graders together. But if you think about it, that's really impractical as far as applying that to the rest of their lives, because they're not going to, in any other time in their life as an adult, they will most likely not find themselves in a situation where they're only surrounded by people their age and only doing one thing. So it just makes sense that that's what you would do with them now. And honestly, from what I have studied recently, it's more of a socialist setting, prepping people for socialism when you put them in a setting like that. So we really don't like it now, you know.
That's what the Marxists would tell you as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they described it.
Yes.
So I'm on your website right now, and I'm actually looking at where it says, how will my student advance?
Yes.
And it says advancement is based on mastery.
Yes.
So what's mastery?
Okay, mastery is where they don't move on to the next part of that subject until they fully understand and they show that they fully understand what they're currently being taught. So with their homework, they'll get when we find things that are answers that are wrong, the work that they do, they'll turn it back into us. We'll check that off. Then they have to go back and correct those, and they have to keep getting more instruction from us and correction on that spot until they understand. Because so when they move on to the next section, they actually have a full foundation before they move on. So, and that's really especially good in math and science, where you really need to understand addition before you go on to multiplication. You really need to understand the structure of an atom before you go on to chemistry. And so to fill in to make sure they have that solid foundation first, and then and then they can move on. So they're all at their own pace. They're not in competition with each other either. In a public school, you have a set amount of time. You have to, I remember looking at my schedule going, oh man, I've got to make sure I teach ecosystems all the way by this point. And if they haven't learned it by then, they just get a D and move, or whatever grade they had. If it was a D, oh well, they didn't understand it, but we were still going to have to move on to the next thing. Well, then they're doing the next thing with a spotty understanding of the foundation below that.
You know, it's interesting that you say that for a number of reasons. So number one, I remember when I was teaching, it was exactly the same thing for me. You know, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to get through all of this stuff because that's what they say I have to get through. And you're right. I mean, sometimes some of my students were kind of left in the dust, if you will, because of that particular thing. And then when my youngest son was in first grade, this was right around the time when, all of the rest of my kids came out. My first one came out in second grade, and then we gave him a year to figure out if we could, homeschool, and then we brought the rest of them out. But I noticed that when my youngest son was in first grade, I kept looking, because I was one of those, mothers that made sure that I looked at everything in the backpack and went over everything with my son and, did all of that kind of thing. And I remember him bringing home various items and me going through them with him for homework. And I realized that he didn't even understand how to add, and they were already on subtraction. And then I was trying to catch him up at home on addition, but then they kept going on subtraction to the point that now we were so far behind, I couldn't catch him up even to where they were if I had pulled him out and just started all over with myself. And then on top of that, I found out that he had dysgraphia, which is he saw his numbers backwards. And so he wasn't even able to figure out how to do math until we attacked his dysgraphia before we did anything else. So I totally see where you're coming from, having been on both sides of that myself, a child who simply was getting way far behind in a regular classroom that just was going on and on and on without him having any, mastery level, even at the from the start. And then me as a teacher, having to figure out how to do that. So I totally, from both sides of that, totally feel like you're on the right track there with that.
Well, and it also goes the opposite of end of the spectrum for the students who are very advanced and gifted.
Yeah.
They often have to hit that pause button once they get to the end of things and wait for the other students to start the next thing, or wait until the next year to go on to the next thing. And at our school, it's totally possible that if someone's ready, they just go on to the next grade level stuff and maybe even the next grade level stuff. And we're not going to hold them back for any reason. Why would we? If they're done, they're done, and that's the way it went. That's why school only went through the 8th grade. Back in the original one-room schoolhouses, they did add high school eventually just for more training. But children were typically already fully educated by the 8th grade. They knew all of their math and science skills, and and quite honestly knew more than what our students know now in school by the end of 8th grade. And they were families and their farms and apprenticeships by then.
So I wanted to ask you one other question. So I noticed on this, because I pulled in your website and I'm reading, that's what's on right here. And so I pulled this in and it says, are you accredited? And it says we are not accredited at this time. So what are your thoughts on accreditation?
We are still looking into it. We met as our board of directors that we have. We discussed it right up front, said we have a lot of people asking, is this something we should do? And decided that, first of all, we didn't understand enough about it to enter into it. And we don't want to do something we don't understand. We want to make sure that we're doing it because it's what's best for our students and what's best for our school. So we're still learning, but what little we did learn about it caused us to hesitate anyways. It seemed like there was a possibility that the government might have too much control over the future of our school, that they might be able to at some point regulate us completely out of existence if we weren't careful. And that was a fear of ours. We didn't want to give them that kind of control.
Well, just out of curiosity, I hate to ask, but we like to ask everybody just because, it's good to know. How do you feel about the tax credit that was just signed in? It's a $7,500 tax credit that people can get. It's refundable. What do you feel about to go to a private school, basically?
Okay, up front, it sounds like a really great thing that would allow them to go to our school. But again, we question, what's the catch? What do we have to do as a school in order for people to use that tax credit towards us? And would that end up strapping us into regulations that would try to force ideology on us that we don't support, or put restrictions on us and on our students? So we're hesitant again. We wonder what long term, what is that going to look like? Is this a trap?
Yeah.
Well,
it's not really a tax credit. They just called it that to get people to vote for it in our legislature. It's they're giving you other people's money, so that's not a tax credit, you know. So that's a big red flag as far as I'm concerned, because they had to lie to get it passed. So that's a problem.
And I mean, it's so tempting though, because with the private schools, we have to charge tuition unless we get donors. And so we're in a bit of a pinch there, you know, because a lot of students can't afford tuition at all. And so we don't want them missing out. We want to serve all the students. So I can see how tempting it would be to just see that and just grab onto it.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it interesting? It just made me think a second. So all of that money that they're giving to families for private school, it would seem to make sense to me that the government didn't take that money in the first place, and then maybe parents would be able to afford private school. So it seems interesting to me that the government wants to steal it from you and then keep it, and then benevolently give it give it back to you.
Right.
When, you know, you could probably be doing something else. What is your, because I've got your website up there for people to be able to see. So if you are interested in that area, you know, please get on their website and look that up and see what you think. Also, let me ask you this question too, Amy. What are you charging for, you know, just give an idea to parents out there what you're charging?
Currently, our tuition is at $700 a month per student for the first student. If you have multiple students in your family, it's 10% off for each additional student. If you decide to pay a full year's worth of tuition, there's another 3% discount there. We do you can apply for a scholarship. So I always tell people, don't just dismiss us if you can't pay that first amount. Tell us what your needs are. Tell us in an email. Say, hey, I need a scholarship, because we are still trying to find donors to help have scholarships in place. People can even get on our website right now and they can actually just pay tuition and sponsor a child to go through our program. And I will say this, and this is more of an unofficial, but we just looked over our books again and our budget, and both the teachers, there's 2 of us teachers, agreed to take a cut and pay to help with this. And we said, if we can get a full roster, we can lower the tuition. So if we have all 40 students on our roster, our tuition, we can go down. We're willing to take a cut and pay as well, and then make that go down to more like at least $500 a month. But we need to fill up the roster in order to make that happen. Just because we have overhead that we have to pay, rent and stuff like that.
Well,
Southwest Covenant in Oklahoma and Yukon, they have like, it's a Patriot Day or something like that, and they have the kids go out into the community and do, like, they'll clean up a park, or they'll do, it's like this huge big deal in our community, and they raise a ton of money. And you might call Steve Hessman is the headmaster and get his ideas on that, because that they do it well.
Well, and you know, it's interesting to me that you know, that you're talking about, you know, that you guys would have to, just am so frustrated that you guys would have to take a pay cut so that, you know, you can afford to do this. And yet, you know, the government never takes a pay cut.
Never. Yes.
But my belief is, if we had enough of these schools pop up all over the place, that people would see that there are other ways to fund it. We would find other ways to fund it. I think it would become easier over time, and we wouldn't have to take those pay cuts. We just, the government's in the way right now with this.
Right.
Where is the government not in the way? But
well, which is prime example of the fact that they are not interested in education. They're interested in controlling the kids.
Exactly.
Because if they were interested in education and your way was working better, they would ask you, what are you doing different? But that's never going to happen.
Right.
You know, that's totally excellent point there too, Julie. I mean, you're exactly right. And I think people who are watching this and people who think oh gosh, that tax credit's great. I'm going to apply for that. The government's so great that they did this. I think you really ought to stop and consider some of those things that we tend to bring up through most of these, interviews that we do, is that, if the government is taking the money and then benevolently giving it back, but then we're having teachers who are starting private schools to be able to offer, children something different than a public school, which are failing. I mean, Julie and I did that podcast just recently too, where we showed you that public schools are failing. And so here's Amy Cook and her friends who are creating a new school, and yet they're already just starting going, well, we'll have to take a pay cut, and yet the government never takes a pay cut. So, let's stop and consider these kinds of things.
Yeah.
So Amy, the next thing I wanted to ask you about, and I'm going to pull this in right now, so just give me 1 second to share our screen here.
Okay. Oh, there's my book.
So tell us about your book.
Oh, okay. So it's been about a year in the making. I meet with a Christian writers group once a month, and I would say they've been very encouraging. We all were writers at heart from the beginning. I mean, early on in our lives. I've been writing just different things just for fun since I was little, like since I was 6, and never really did anything with it. And then as life has happened, it's been on my heart to give some of this to people around me. And so I wanted a book that talked about being a warrior. In the public school, I became a whistleblower partway through the school year, or my school service for 6 years, but I think it was year 3. Yeah. I was the whistleblower in Tulsa who pointed out the critical race theory themed stuff that they were forcing on us teachers, and sent all the proof in, and that's what got them demoted. And so, but that took a lot of courage I didn't used to have. And then on top of that, saying no, 2 years into my teaching, I said no to their sex ed curriculum, which is not sex ed, it's sexual relationship ed, and has nothing to do with the deed itself or any biology really. Well, it has a tiny bit to do with it, but mostly it was introducing their ideology, the made up orientations and genders. And so when I refused that, I flat out refused that and told them I would quit if they told me I had to. They found ways around it, but I continued to fight it over the last few years because they would try to sneak it in different ways. And so speaking out against that and getting brave and just keep continuing to talk out against it, even when at one point they made up a bunch of false accusations against me at the school and had the media all over it and some death threats, and it got kind of crazy the last 2 years of my teaching. The students protesting me in the halls for 4 days straight. That was really interesting. Wow. So I took all of those experiences and I thought, I feel like I have been in training to become a warrior for God, and that it's not just me, that all women have a calling on their lives to be a warrior in whatever part of life God has placed them in, whether it's in the home or out in their career or in some specific battlefield, missionaries, all sorts of different battlefields. And that maybe some of the reasons that they're not stepping out and speaking up is because they just don't know where to start. So I wanted a Bible study that would be easy and but relevant to this. So I did 12 chapters, so you can do it over 12 weeks if you want to, although everyone I've given it to so far just reads it within a few days. So I don't know, that they can do it that way too, that's fine. But every chapter starts out with a key verse and then talks about relating it to my personal experience and to life in general, and then some discussion questions and then a prayer. And then at the end of the book, you'll find a poem written by a dear sweet friend of mine, Kathy Keith, who writes beautiful poetry. And it's a poem where you can put insert your name in it and claim your warriorship. But it is where you are being called, being equipped, and belonging as a warrior. So all 3 of those themes are in there.
That's sounds like an excellent book. Wow. I can't wait. I'm going to get it for sure.
Yay.
Daughters.
Yes. I hope to do a book signing soon. It's a slow process. I'm finding out it's my first book to publish, and being self-published, it's just long and drawn out and tedious. There's I have to wait until I can afford to buy more books if I want to sell them in person, but I am setting up some probably in September, a couple of book signings locally.
So I want to go back then and ask you about this. So you were very clear that, and you said this just a second ago, you said, I didn't think I could stand up. I didn't think, you said, I didn't think I have, the gumption to be able to do that. So my question is, you saw all this happening, and Julie and I know numbers of people are frustrated by, we know there are good teachers out there in the classroom. I mean, we know that they're out there, and we always hate to say, the teachers, blanket judgment, the teachers are fill in the blank, indoctrinating students, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we hate to do that. But then on the other hand, and Julia said this, and it's absolutely phenomenal and true. She said, okay, but if we're always concerned about, lumping teachers all under one blanket, but then hold on a second, where are the teachers like Amy Cook who are going to stand up and say, no, we're not doing that to those kids? Why is it that suddenly you just apparently, I'm asking you, woke up and went, okay, I'm done with this. I have to speak out.
Well, one thing I will say in defense of some of those other teachers who haven't been brave enough, I came in late in the game. So no matter what, I wasn't going to get much retirement out of it because I started teaching so late in my career. And so, because I did healthcare before that. And so for me, it was a little easier to walk away from that aspect. You have a lot of teachers who are in maybe their 20th year, their 25th year, and they're nearing retirement, and they don't want to jeopardize what they have built up and lose all that, because they do take quite a bit out of every paycheck towards the retirement fund. So that's a big deal. That's what they're counting on, looking forward to support them once they retire. And it's scary to think about that going away. And really, it just came down to a decision. Was my paycheck more important than these children? And that's where I was in that. And I don't expect everyone else to be able to make that decision. That was tough. I mean, it was scary. One thing that helped me was that I have a very supportive husband who, when I told him, I looked at him with just dread in my eyes and I said, honey, I think I'm going to have to do something that could cost me my job. And this was when I was about to say no to teaching the sex ed that first time. And he said, well, that's what you have to do then. You have to do this. You can't deny the truth. You can't give out something that you know is wrong. Yeah. So that helped. Maybe not everyone has a support system behind them, a family who will understand if they put their job on the line. So,
well, you said something to just a second ago, which is, I completely agree. And that makes complete sense. But I want to point out, because Julie and I like to point out the evils of government as often as we can. And that is, so you made this really excellent point just a second ago. So if I've been teaching for 20 years and the state has been taking my money, and been putting it away in a retirement account, and I get it, money makes money. And the more money you have, the more money you make. And that's why a lot of the states and a lot of businesses and that kind of thing pool retirement funds, because you actually make more money on a larger volume of money. And I understand that. But here's the thing. As soon as you get involved with we've experienced this as a family too, as soon as you get involved with your employer, and now your employer is taking money out of your paycheck to fund a retirement account, and now you can't get to it. You don't have any ability to manage that money except for, I'm just going to choose this account or that account. You don't have an ability to take it out or manipulate it the way you want. And think about this. It's the same way with public servants, because it's not just teachers. I mean, it's any public servant. It's anybody who is employed by the government. And as Julia likes to point out, over half the people in some cases are now employed by the government. They take the money from your paycheck and put it in a retirement account. Well, now that's a good thing to use against you. Well, if you speak out and you happen to get fired or you leave your job, now you don't get your retirement. That really stifles free thought, and that stifles the ability to redress your government, which is why we had a giant tea party in the early 1700s.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And I mean, another thing that happened was a lot of teachers, they would come to me in private and they would say, we support you. We know that what you're saying is true and right. But when I asked them, well, you could always, or I'd say, well, you can speak up too. Oh, no. I couldn't do that. That's the response I got. And they were watching, though, as I got bullied publicly. My school threw me to the media, threw me to the wolves, and unapologetically, and let the media just tear me to pieces, and even put my family on display at one point. And so they're watching all of this and thought they didn't want that to happen to them. So then that helped them be silenced. And I will say that, and this is so important for people to understand because people do not know this, but the union is 100%. Teacher unions are 100%, even the local ones, behind all of this. They're behind every part of it. And as long as we keep allowing the unions to have such a heavy foothold in our schools and be allowed on the inside of the schools, they should never be allowed on that. They should be an outside entity, period. They should never be allowed to be inside and helping make decisions at all. But yet there they are, whispering in the teacher's ear saying, well, we're here to protect you. We're here to make sure that your rights are protected and you're paid enough. No, they're not. I guarantee you, ask a teacher who's already not been represented by the union when they needed them most. And they'll be glad to tell you their scenario that the moment they withdrew their dues was when they had something happening in their life, and all of a sudden it's crickets from the union. They're nowhere to be found. They're silent. So
what are they making for, what is their salary for being in the union leadership?
Right. They just want the teachers' money. They don't care about those teachers. They truly don't.
Yeah, the lobbyists. And throw in the Superintendent's Association and the School Board Association along with the Teachers Association. It is quite the racket.
Yeah.
So you had a friend there, which was, I got distracted because your friend was jumping in your lap.
That was my dog Ellie. Yeah, she wanted to, so sorry about that. She's my little schnauzer. Yeah.
We've had roosters and children and all kinds of things going through the background, so don't be alarmed or worried.
So I wanted to make mention of something, since you said this a second ago, and I don't think people understand this, and teachers, former teachers and teachers currently do understand this very well, but regular people don't understand this. You said the union should not be in our schools. And I think people don't understand what that means, but I'm going to ask you if this happened to you. So when I was teaching, because this was years ago, when I got out of teaching, but when we were teachers, you had like one day where you went into the cafeteria or whatever, and they had all of these groups, you had all of the teachers unions, and they actually came into the cafeteria and tried to sell you their wares along with insurance companies and whatever. It's like teachers are like teachers are like a commodity, and you can, because they're this one group, you can sell things to them. And I remember the first year that I was teaching in a public school, and I went in and I was like, why am I here? And what are you people doing? I mean, why is this? Because you would think they would say something like, okay, here you have this opportunity to be involved in this, go out and get your information. But they literally bring these people into the school, and at least they did for me. And it's very makes you feel kind of like you have to take part in it, because your other teachers are watching. And if you're not a member of the union, did you feel kind of bullied into it?
Yes, but they've taken it to a whole new level now. So the only union that you will see represented in Tulsa Public Schools, now there's the only ones I can talk for because they're the only ones I've worked for, is the TCTA, the Tulsa, the local union, and then the OEA, which is the state union, and the NEA, the national. Those are the ones that are represented inside the school. In fact, when you do the onboarding, so that's when a new teacher, even if they're experienced, a new teacher comes in, signs all their W's and all their other forms to fill out, health forms, whatever. There's this table, and you kind of go down the table with they put papers in your folder and say, okay, now sign this. Okay, now sign this. So right next to your W-2, you're signing. They'll have a paper that says, oh, and here's your, this is for your union dues. It's this much, and it just automatically comes out of your paycheck. They present it in a way that it just sounds like it's something that's required, that you're supposed to do it. And that's actually borderline federally illegal, thanks to Rebecca Friedrichs and some other brave people who have fought that all the way to the Supreme Court and won eventually, that no public school can force a teacher to belong to a union. They do not have to pay dues. But they don't present it that way. And then throughout the year, you will see maybe other little non-union organizations that can also do the same thing. Will be the only way they're represented. They might have a little flyer in your mailbox occasionally, but the TCTA, they're allowed inside your school. They have reps. They have designated reps inside the school, teachers who they will announce regularly that you can go to and talk to, and they'll come and check on you even. And they hand out their paraphernalia in the teacher's lounge. They put on the luncheons and stuff in the teacher's lounge, and they'll bring us all sorts of food and treats. And that's always a great way to win a teacher's heart, because we don't get to eat as much as people think. Lunch is a luxury, so they do all these things, but you don't see the other unions in there or the other non-unions in there doing any of that. They may try occasionally to bring something in, but there's such a heavy presence of TCTA that's all you see. It's very dominant. And if you withdraw your dues, you immediately get an email and a visit from your building rep going, what's wrong? What happened? Why aren't you with it? And then if you tell them you just don't want to be in it, well, then they want to start filling your head with fear. Well, now this could happen to you if you're not represented. Wow. Yeah. And then you see throughout the year, 2 or 3 times a year, you'll see what they call ratification documents. And they'll even send out emails. Here's the new ratification. Look what we've done. Look what we've negotiated for you. And so once this is signed off, they'll say everyone needs to come and vote on this. And once it's signed off, this will be your new pay and your new contract things. So they're allowing the unions to come in and actually decide the parameters of our teaching, how many hours we teach, what our breaks look like. What our pay should be, should there be raises, where should the money be allocated all around. And that's all stuff that they're letting the local union come in and negotiate. And they're actually structured in a way that it's required that the union come in and negotiate that.
Whoa,
it should not be that way.
Such a red state. How could that be?
Exactly. How could that be? Because Tulsa has become so liberal. And we've got to get away from that. That's the only way. We're letting them get such a foothold in our community. Now I will say, from talking to other teachers in rural and even suburban schools, that this is just simply not the case. So what we're seeing, this is in our big cities like Tulsa and Oklahoma City. So honestly, I look at those, and it just, to me, looks like 2 big cancer spots on Oklahoma, that if we don't get those healed up, it's going to spread.
Well, I taught in Oklahoma City public schools, so I was, in a large district. I taught in Deer Creek public schools as well, but there was some of that in Deer Creek, but there was totally, when I was in Oklahoma City public schools, they had that. And I do remember feeling, and the way you're describing it, it sounds, I mean, like it was worse than when I was even there. But it sounds to me like, because I did know that when I was at Deer Creek Public Schools, I felt like, because I had some teachers who were very pro-union and I was very anti-union, and I didn't want to be part of the union, and I never signed up for it. But they would, I mean, there was some bullying going on there if you didn't want to be a part of a union. I mean, and I actually felt that. I was pretty young at the time, and thought, gosh, what difference does it make to you if, I'm not in the union or not? But it did definitely feel like, because you were, everybody was there together, and if you didn't want to do this, that there was something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
I
yeah.
mean,
And I had a target on my back as soon as I had a face-to-face conversation with Shauna Mott-Wright. I actually was having a conversation with her just because I had her children in my class, and I was talking to her about their progress in the class, having a very nice conversation. And then the conversation, and unbeknownst to me, I didn't realize what position she really had in the union at that time, or I might have had a slightly different conversation with her. But we got on on some other subjects, and she mentioned that she was involved in her church and stuff like that. So we had some common ground. And so I felt safe enough to tell her some of the things I was disappointed with at our school. And then she pushed about union membership. And I said, oh, no, I don't want to be part of a union. I don't want to be part of the union. And here's why. And I started telling her all the evils that I knew about the union at that point. Oh, and that just didn't go over well with her. And she was, oh, well, you need us. And after that conversation, I can trace it back to that conversation. After that conversation, things started happening. Just students taking things way out of context with me if I happen to make a comment or something, or just flat out making up stuff about me and telling my principal, oh, Miss Cook is proselytizing in the classroom. And it's like, no, I don't have time for that. I barely had time to teach all the science they wanted me to teach. So.
Well, who is Shauna Mott-Wright? Make sure everybody knows who that is.
Oh, okay, so she was. Now I could get this wrong, but wasn't she she was the president? Or no,
President.
that was
No, Shauna Mott-Wright was the president.
Yeah. Okay.
I believe it was
TCTA. OEA. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know she was all the way up that far. I knew that she had a heavy presence with TCTA at that time, and was because she was always carrying around TCTA tote bags and stuff.
The merch.
Yeah. The merch. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought she was, and she was, I'm actually looking, she was elected as the TCTA vice president and then the NEA director on behalf of the Oklahoma Education Association, so the OEA. So yeah, I mean, she was very, very, very up in the union leadership in Oklahoma.
Right. And I mean, and I will say though that, before she knew where I stood on all that, it was a great relationship. It was a joy having her children in my class. So as a person on the side, I don't want to say anything negative outside of that. I really think a lot of people who end up supporting unions are just so misled, ill-informed. Or they're so deep into it, they don't know how to get out. I don't know, but I don't think it's always a reflection of who they are outside of the union. So.
Well, I'm oftentimes bowled over. I just can't understand. I was just watching a video with another author that we're going to have on next month, actually. And I was watching the podcast that she was doing. And the man that she was doing the podcast with, the presenter, actually said that he was a conservative, he said conservative, whatever that meant, but libertarian. And then at one point in the discussion, he goes on to talk about how how he feels like public schools are doing, their jobs, and that's what, public schools are. He has his kids in public schools, and he's gonna, that's where he wants his kids to be. And I just remember thinking to myself, wait a minute. So you just said you're a libertarian, quote, conservative, and you don't seem to understand that the unions, teachers unions, have problems. We have sex ed issues. I mean, all the things that you brought up, and it just, I think for some reason, it shocks me that people will say on one hand, yes, public schools suck, but oh, not mine.
Yeah.
There are some schools who are staying away from all of that, especially in Oklahoma. You get those little schools, especially the little rural ones. I know of some who just don't have these issues. And so for them, they're going, I don't think this is happening. Well, that's not happening at their school. So I can see how it would be easy for them to then start spreading that lie around, because they're just basing that on what they perceive instead of what they haven't seen. Until you've been inside the bigger schools that are dealing with this, you just don't know. I didn't know.
Yeah.
If anyone really, I'd love to just put in a quick plug. If anyone wants to know for sure, wants to really deeply understand what's going on with the unions in public schools, there's a girl, Rebecca Friedrichs. She founded For Kids and Country in California. And she's a Christian conservative retired teacher. She went through all that bullying from the union herself. She's the one who took it all to the Supreme Court. She lost only because a judge passed away, but then the person right behind her finished the job to make it to where they can't require teachers to pay union dues. But she wrote a book called Standing Up to Goliath. So if you are interested in reading that book, it is super informative. I'm looking over here to see if I have it on my bookshelf, but I've got it on a different bookshelf, so I can't show you
What was her name again?
Rebecca Friedrichs. So it's Friedrichs, and then Rebecca is her first name. Lovely lady. She's become a dear friend of mine. And she still is fighting for teachers in public schools. She has a program where it's Adopt a Teacher, and you're helping encourage these teachers all across the country who are being bullied for just simply being conservative, or just simply wanting to teach instead of indoctrinate. And so she is championing those teachers and encouraging them and letting them know they're not alone. But the name of the website or the foundation is For Kids and Country. So very good organization.
All right. So we're coming in on about an hour, and we're gonna, since it's Friday morning, we'll try not to take up too much of your time. But I did want to say this, and get your take on this kind of at the end here. So you clearly are not a person who says, well, this is terrible, and then just goes back to doing whatever you were doing before you discovered it was terrible. So, Pat, you have the book, and we'll put that up again, Warrior Up, Empowering Women to be Warriors for God. You have the book. But what do you suggest for, let's say, parents who don't really want to put their kids back in public school, for teachers, I mean, what are kind of your closing thoughts on all of, we have had such a great discussion on all of the things that we've talked about this morning?
My thoughts are the same. You can go back to a quote from Corrie ten Boom, where she was addressing asking her father what was sex sin, and he gave her the example. He said, well, he didn't answer right away. He had her carry the suitcases, or he said, carry these suitcases off the train, but she said, no, they're too heavy. And he said, that's the way some information is. Sometimes it's too heavy for you to bear. And I think that's what we need to look at. The schools right now are not safe for children. You're sending your children into a place where they are not going to be taught what most of you want your children to be taught, but yet you're sending them there anyways. And I know some people are saying, well, I want my child to be that shining light in the darkness.
Yeah.
why would we ever send a child into an adult battle? That information is too heavy for them right now, and it's too dangerous for their tender young souls. So I would say, yes, it's scary and it's hard to think about, but rearrange your schedules. If you have to work opposite schedules of each other for a while, both spouses, to make it work. I know for single parents, this is the most difficult, and my heart goes out to them because they can't just homeschool their kids all the time. It's not always an option. So that's not an easy solution, because maybe they feel like they don't have a choice but to send their kids to public schools. If you have no choice and you have to send your kids to public schools, just really watch, ask questions, keep an eye on everything, be hyper vigilant. Yes, it's inconvenient, but then isn't parenting a joyful inconvenience? We have to be watchful. We're their guardians, we're their protectors. That's our commission, and it's a double commission. And because God says that if we lead any of these astray, that it would be better for a millstone to be hung around our neck and drown in the depths of the sea.
Right.
So
I watched your video that you have up on your Guardian Academy and included that in our last newsletter. If for people in that area that are interested in your academy, I highly recommend they go to your website and watch that. It's like 3 minutes, right? And it's so informative and kind of gives the heart of what you're trying to do there at that school. And I loved it. So
we were thinking about doing a new one, but thank you.
Well, do another one too. I mean, I'm sure it'll be done well, but I loved that one. I thought it was done very well.
I wish I had my whole team with me, because the other 3 ladies are absolutely fabulous, hardworking. They have a heart for children and a heart for God. So we're a great team. Come meet us.
Yeah.
Oh, there they are. Oh, there's my team. That's not even all of them. We've brought on a 4th person, Amanda, and she handles our financials, and she's wonderful too. So
Good.
So here's the video.
Success for your school this year.
Thanks.
Well, here's the video. So anybody who wants to get on, again, here is your, here, go here, Guardian Academy. OK.com. Go there, and this is the video that you can see that Amy does at the beginning that explains about the school. So definitely get on and look at that. So anything else?
I encourage, if you are sitting there thinking, I need to do more, I need to speak out, God's talking to you. Don't ignore that. We know what happened to that one guy with the whale. So do what you're called to do.
There one way or the other.
It only takes just a few seconds of bravery. Step out there. You'd be surprised how much God will bless your life for standing up for what's right.
Well, and I might also add too, on the standing up thing, so many people need a leader. They need a leader. And I don't want to say they're followers or anything like that, but I'm just saying there are a lot of, I loved my mother. My mother was a phenomenal woman, but my mother was not me. And she would often say, oh, I'm so glad you can go out there and say those things that I just don't feel like I can say. Well, and that's great. And that's what I did and what I do. And that's all fine. But I think it's important to remember that, as Amy steps out, as any of us step out, we're actually leaders for the other people who do. And we help to provide, some people just want somebody to stand behind, and so being brave and being that warrior allows other people to find their bravery and their ability to warrior on and soldier on. So don't forget that you're not just doing it. It's not a selfish thing to stand up. That's not what it is. Oftentimes God is calling you to do that because he knows that once you step out in leadership, then you will have other people who will follow. So Amy Cook, thank you so much for being a leader and a warrior. And we've been so blessed to have you on this morning and be able to hear from you. And thank you so much.
Of course. My pleasure.
Again, everybody look for her website, and thanks again for being with us. And we hope to visit with you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So that was a lot of fun to hear from Amy this morning. That was great.
That was so good.
Oh my gosh.
I love that she just, so nonchalantly told about how they boycotted her, or basically she put a target on her back, and all of the things that went, she went through in the public schools, just for being that teacher that said, no, I'm not doing that. And
yeah, so
that's
teachers,
always my question, why aren't there a ton of those?
Yeah. And because as Amy pointed out, and she did it aptly and succinctly and very well, that was, it's, if you have a job and you're a single parent and you have to have that job, you're kind of stuck. And then again, what we need to think of and what we need to be bringing up over and over and over again is, don't give your retirement money to your employer at any level. Don't.
Right.
I mean, no, it's not. I understand it's not going to earn probably the same amount as putting it in that pot with everybody else's, but dadgummit, what's more important? Control, you having control over your things, or your government having control over your things? And we've got to start thinking about that at the basic level. And that does come with retirement. I know that I've thought about that with Dave's, employer, and we've thought about that numerous times, but I never thought about that with government employees. It's no wonder government employees won't sound off. If you're going to lose the retirement that you put in for 25 years, why would you do that?
Right. Well, I have a friend that's an educator, and she's two years away from retirement, and she said, I can't believe parents are still bringing their kids to public schools. And I can't out her because that would not be,
I know.
but she's stuck.
So my t-shirt for this morning, Jesus is watching, everybody.
Yes.
So please, we're getting ready to go into school. My son's already started his college classes already at his school. So I know we're getting ready to go on into school, but don't forget, it's never a mistake to do something that you feel like God is leading you to do. And even if that's, I'm already into school, I'm already enrolled, I'm on this trajectory, don't forget, if God is calling you, he will equip you. And I think Amy Cook is an excellent example of that. So
she's such a great example. And hopefully her book will give others courage to do the same.
Absolutely.
And, I'm not kidding. After talking to her for an hour, I can't wait to read her book. And I wish I had gotten it ahead of time. I didn't think about it until day before yesterday, or I probably would have gotten it and read it ahead of time. I was like, oh, she's got a book. I already knew that, but I didn't get the book. But
well, again, it's Friday, so we'll get off of here because, I know everybody's wanting to start their weekend, but again, if God calls you, he will equip you. Nothing is ever a mistake. They're only lessons learned. You parent are the educator for your child in every possible way. And you may not feel like you can do it because, Amy was a science teacher. I was a science teacher. You don't have to be a teacher to teach your own children, or God wouldn't have given them to you. So you can do this.
People used to ask me all the time, because I was at the school all the time. They would ask me why I didn't just get my teaching degree. And I said, because I won't follow the rules. I know that. So I already
Yeah.
knew I wouldn't follow the rules, so I didn't see the point.
Yeah. Well, if you're in and around the East Tulsa area, look up Amy Cook School. It is Guardian Academy. Look there, guardianacademyok.com. Look them up. And then also too, Heaven Sent. Heaven.
For heaven's sake.
I don't know why I can't remember that. I'm so sorry, Lauren Straka.
For
For heaven's sake. In Yukon, if you're in that area, also look up that school as well if you're interested in finding another option for your children. So have a wonderful weekend.
Are popping up. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Have a wonderful weekend. And Julia, it's always a blessing to be with you every Wednesday and Friday. And don't forget, we'll have new guests on Wednesday and Friday next week. We'll have David Bullard, Senator David Bullard will be on Wednesday, August 9th. So stay tuned for that. And we'll have our SAI, our state auditor and inspector, Cindy Bird, will be with us on Friday, the 11th. So please make sure to tune in on those dates. And, you know, when you join us live, if you join us live, you can ask questions.
Yeah.
So join us live. So Julie, it was great to see you again, and everybody have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Wednesday, the 9th, with Senator David Bullard. Have a great weekend.